Welcome. I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk to you about the book and where you are in the journey of this book. I wanted to start with kind of asking Bill a question about why he chose to write this book and to capture his thoughts and to deliver them in this format. So, Bill?
Thanks for asking, Mark. In my teaching, I looked at my students through the lens of being an engineering manager, knowing what they're going to have to do, what's going to be expected of them on the other end. And I wanted to help. And honestly, I tried to help, but I ran into two things. One of the things that I saw was they didn't have the perspective to really understand what I was trying to say. And so it was hard for them to make adjustments. The other was I overwhelmed them. It's like I was talking about things way down the road and it overwhelmed them. So that's really when I realized, okay, if I'm going to help students, it's going to have to be a journey. It's little by little. And so I really wrote to have something to give my students to help them along with the journey. And kind of the philosophy that we both have said we have, that we want to write about things that engineering students aren't going to see somewhere else. And something that we're passionate about and want to help them. And so that's really why I wrote the book, to be able to give students something that's going to help them, lead them along the journey, little by little, teach them the things that they need to know to then be ready to be a good engineer when they get out. And I guess, I can ask you the same question. You joined along in this and contributed a lot of energy and sweat. So how about you? Why did you jump on board?
Yeah, so you brought up the fact that some of the engineers you were talking to, or engineering students you were talking to, weren't hearing some of this elsewhere. And that had been my experience. So running a large engineering organization, we were at times hiring 100 engineers a year, mostly out of college, so fresh graduates. And I would sit down with them in smaller, large groups and talk to them about their early career and those kinds of things, kind of a group mentoring, welcome aboard session. And the questions I would get in kind of that format were all of the same kinds of questions that to me were relatively basic for early career advancement, but things that they obviously weren't hearing because we're hearing it from students from multiple universities, multiple walks of life, multiple degree backgrounds, and with some really common themes there. This book afforded me an opportunity to jump in with you and kind of capture some of those and put them in a ready reference type model so kids can pull these off the shelf at any point in their career and use it as a developmental aid.
Any words of encouragement you have for people that are going through the book now?
Yeah, I think that this is hard, right? Personal development is one of the hardest things to do. Career development is one of the hardest things to do. So I would say to those reading it, this isn't going to be easy. It's personal development. One of my daughter's swim coaches used to use the phrase, we've heard the phrase practice makes perfect. She turned that around and said practice makes permanent. And the reason she switched that up was the idea of folks saying, if I practice this, I'm going to be perfect at it. You're not going to be perfect in almost anything found in this book. The idea is practice what you are trying to develop in a way to make it permanent so you advance your development. And I think that's the word of encouragement. This kind of thing isn't easy. Personal development's harder than much learning, but that would be my thought. How about you?
Yeah, no, I was going to say exactly. I always say you can't act one way in school and then think you're going to turn around in one day and go to work and act differently. You've got to start now building these habits. And wherever you are, some of you have had a lot of life experiences, so you're further along on these traits. Others of you haven't, and you're further down. But my encouragement is to get engaged in building these, because if you've got a habit of that in school, that's going to come out when you sit down in front of that engineering manager. So wherever you are on the continuum, that manager is going to see that you are the kind of person that is working on learning these things, and that's the kind of person that they're going to want to hire because they know you're going to continue to grow.
Yeah. So how about from your perspective, one of the highlights of the book, maybe just to kind of close our thoughts here, a story or one of the highlights in the book that you like to focus on?
Sure. And I want to combine two. It's learn with the intent to act and active listening. You are going to need the material from your engineering classes. We hear this over and over from engineers that come and talk to our classes, and for two reasons. And Mark, you know this, managing engineers, you're either going to need it directly for your job or directly for the job you have 3, 4, or 5 years from now. But also, Your job may not use those technical skills, but your job is doing things that's making you interface with people where that knowledge that you have, you need to be able to talk to them. They are doing that side of the technical piece for you, but you've got to have the background to be able to talk to them. So you've got to learn and retain the material from your class, and that means going to class with the intent to learn, the intent to act. And so I guess my encouragement there is two things. Go to class curious and go to class making connections. You've got to stay engaged in class to learn. And I understand that's hard. It's hard to sit there an hour and 15 minutes and stay engaged. So go curious. Go, I wonder what I'm going to learn today. As your instructor is talking, make connections. Say, well, wait a minute, how does this relate to that? How does this relate to this topic in this other class? By doing that, you're keeping your mind active, and it's going to help you stay engaged. And those connections are going to help you ask intelligent questions to learn the material even deeper.
Yeah, and those connections are, so that's lead into the story I like to focus on. The topic is kind of the mental filing cabinet approach, and the way to have a filing system mentally. So you talk about those connections. A lot of times we take in information, unless we train ourselves otherwise, we take in information in chunks, and we don't make those connections. Mm-hmm. And absent making those connections, the more you take in, the more difficult it's going to be to make the necessary connections. So the time to do it is active listening right when it's happening and make mm-hmm. those connections and figure out a way to store that. I liken it to sticky notes on my desk. If I've got a couple sticky notes of things I've got to get done today, that's an acceptable filing system for me. If I'm in an active listening mode in a classroom and stuff's coming at me hard like it does when you advance through your engineering curriculum, it's a stack of sticky notes in different colors mm-hmm. and writing I can't read because I was in a hurry, and that's what your brain's now stored. So active listening and coming curious is the precursor in my mind to having a way to file that information for later in your engineering curriculum and later in your career.
Sure. And then when you get on the job, you will have those things to pull out.
Yep, those are that practice makes permanent kind of success tools that will allow you to be able to pull them out and be active in your career as well. So just a chance for us to talk to you a little bit, to encourage you hopefully on this journey. We hope you find the rest of the book beneficial to you. We hope you dog-ear some pages and mark it up and keep it for ready reference into the future. If you don't, you only read it once. Hopefully a couple things stick, but our goal would be that it's collecting markups and everything else on the shelf throughout your career.
Yeah. So thank you very much for being willing to go on this journey with us. We said earlier, we know it's hard. We know you're working on who you are, on improving those things. And Mark and I appreciate that you have trusted us enough to go through the book and to try to put these things into practice. So we are working on the next volume, the next edition, whatever you want to call it now. And I'm really excited about it. Mark's taking lead on that piece because it's really starting to focus more on the later career side and those things that he's got insight as an engineering manager for a lot of years. So keep a lookout for it, and we're going to try to continue to stay with you on this journey.